A month after my husband walked out on me for his fitness trainer, he reappeared on my doorstep, drenched and trembling, carrying a secret that twisted his betrayal into something far more sinister. The chipped coffee mug was the first thing I packed away. It was an ugly thing, a souvenir from a trip we took 15 years ago with a goofy cartoon lobster on it. Mark had dropped it on our first morning in our new house, and a tiny piece of the rim had flaked off. He was devastated, ready to throw it out, but I'd laughed and said it gave it character. Now it's our mug, I'd told him, uniquely, imperfectly ours. For 15 years, that was his mug. Every single morning, he'd drink his coffee from it. Now, it just sat in the cupboard, a silent ceramic accusation. It all started so innocently. A New Year's resolution. Mark, my husband of 2 decades, decided he was going to get in shape. I was all for it. We'd both gotten a little soft around the edges, comfortable in the happy rhythm of our life. So when he joined the high-end gym, Apex Fitness, I cheered him on. I didn't mind the 5 a.m. alarms or the blender whirring with protein and kale before the sun was up. I was proud of him. He was taking control, finding a new passion. The passion, it turned out, wasn't just for weightlifting. Her name was Chloe. At first, she was just my trainer. Chloe says I need to up my protein. Chloe gave me this new workout for my core. Chloe thinks I could run a half marathon by summer. Her name became a constant buzzing presence in our home, a third person in our marriage I'd never met. I saw pictures of her on the gym's Instagram page. She was 28, with abs that looked like they were carved from marble and a blindingly white smile. She was all high ponytails, neon spandex, and motivational hashtags. She was everything I wasn't. I was comfortable sweaters, a love for baking, and the fine lines around my eyes that told the story of a life lived with laughter and a few tears. The distance between Mark and me grew in inches, then feet, then miles, all within the 4 walls of our home. He stopped wanting the pasta dinners I made, opting for a Tupperware of grilled chicken and broccoli instead. He stopped staying up to watch our favorite show with me, claiming he needed to be rested for his morning session with Chloe. Our conversations, once a comfortable flow of shared jokes and plans, became stilted interviews. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Good. Productive." "Chloe pushed me hard today," he'd reply, his eyes glued to his phone, probably scrolling through fitness feeds. The end came on a Tuesday. There was no shouting, no dramatic fight. That would have been easier, I think. Instead, he sat me down on the sofa, the one we'd picked out together after weeks of searching, and delivered his verdict like a doctor giving a terminal diagnosis. He was calm, his voice steady. He'd rehearsed this. "I'm not happy, Sarah," he started, using that classic gutless line. "I feel like I've been asleep for years and I'm just now waking up. I need to live my life for me." "And what does that mean, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. "I'm in love with Chloe," he said. The words were like perfectly polished stones, smooth and cold and utterly devoid of emotion. "She gets me. She sees the man I want to be. I'm moving out. I've already got a place with her." And just like that, 20 years were erased. 20 years of building a home, of inside jokes, of holding each other through sickness and celebrating successes. It was all packed up and discarded as easily as an old piece of gym equipment. He left that night. I stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway, the red taillights disappearing into the darkness, taking my entire world with them. The next month was a blur of hollow days and sleepless nights. The silence in the house was deafening. I boxed up his things, my hands shaking as I folded the shirts I'd bought him, the ones he'd worn on our anniversaries. Friends called, offering sympathy that felt like sandpaper on a raw wound. And, of course, I saw them online. Mark and Chloe, their life was a curated collection of perfect moments. Sunrise hikes, matching workout gear, smoothie bowls arranged like art, and captions full of couple goals and bunny new beginnings. He looked younger, happier, vibrant. He was the man Chloe wanted him to be. I was just the before picture. I was just starting to feel like I could breathe again, like the gaping hole in my chest was beginning to scar over. It was a month to the day since he had left. A rainy, miserable Thursday night. I was curled up on the sofa nursing a cup of tea and trying to lose myself in a movie when the doorbell rang. It was almost 11 p.m. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was Mark. I opened the door, 100 angry questions ready to spill from my lips, but they died on my tongue the moment I saw him. This wasn't the glowing, revitalized man from the Instagram photos. The man on my doorstep was a ghost. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes wide and bloodshot, dark circles etched beneath them like bruises. He was trembling, his expensive gym jacket soaked through with rain. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, or worse, like he was about to become one. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my voice as brittle as frozen glass. I didn't move to let him in, just stood there, blocking the doorway to the life he had shattered, the rain dripping from his hair onto the welcome mat. "Sarah, please," he stammered, his teeth chattering from the cold or fear, I couldn't tell which. Just let me come in for a minute. I have to tell you something. I'm in trouble." Against every self-protective instinct screaming at me to slam the door in his face, I stepped aside. He stumbled past me into the warmth of the hall, leaving a trail of wet footprints on the floor he'd once promised to re-sand. He wrapped his arms around himself, looking small and lost in the oversized jacket. This wasn't the confident, preening man from the photos, the one flexing in a mirror next to his new, upgraded life. This was a scared little boy. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" I asked, crossing my arms, maintaining a wall of ice between us. "Did you run out of kale? Did Chloe's perfect abs finally run away from you?" The words were cruel, but they were all I had. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "It's not like that," he whispered, his eyes darting around the living room, reacquainting himself with the furniture, the photos on the mantel, the ghost of the life he'd executed. "None of it is what it looks like. The hikes, the gym. It's all a performance, a requirement." I just stared at him. A requirement for what? A gold medal in narcissism? "It's a cult, Sarah." The words hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Apex Fitness, Chloe, it's a goddamn cult." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "A cult? Mark, it's a gym. An expensive, pretentious gym for people with more money than sense. You left me for a cult?" "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising with desperation. "It starts with fitness, with unlocking your potential. That's how she hooks you. She finds people like me, middle-aged, feeling lost, wanting something more. She makes you feel seen. She rebuilds you." He gestured wildly with his hands. "The diet, the workouts, it's all about breaking you down. She controlled everything. What I ate, when I slept, who I was allowed to talk to. She went through my phone every night. She convinced me to link our bank accounts for simplicity. She said my old life, my old friends, you were holding me back from my true self. A chilling memory surfaced, a phone call with his sister a couple of weeks ago. She'd been worried. Mark had missed their mother's birthday and had sent a terse, impersonal text message that didn't sound like him at all. I had dismissed it as him being absorbed in his new life. Now it felt sinister. She isolated me, he continued, his voice cracking. I haven't spoken to my family in 3 weeks. She told me they were negative energy. The only people I saw were other Apex members. We all had the same diet, the same schedule, the same empty look in our eyes. He sank onto the edge of the armchair, the one that used to be his, and buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with ragged, silent sobs. The anger in my chest began to dissolve, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. This was more than just a bad breakup. This was something dark and twisted. "Why are you here now, Mark? What happened tonight?" I asked, my voice softer this time. He looked up, his face a mess of tears and rain. "Tonight was the level up ceremony," he choked out, "for those of us who had shown total commitment. I thought it was just some stupid branding thing, a party, but it wasn't." He took a shuddering breath. "They brought out a brazier, Sarah, a fire, and an iron." My blood turned to ice. An iron. "It's a brand," he whispered, the words barely audible. "The Apex logo. They call it the mark of dedication. It signifies that you're no longer a client. You're property. You belong to them. For life." He fumbled with the zipper on his jacket, his hands shaking so violently he could barely manage it. He peeled the wet fabric back, then pulled up the sleeve of the tight workout shirt he was wearing underneath. There, on the flesh of his bicep, was a seared, blistering red welt, the skin angry and weeping. In the center of the burn, I could just make out the stylized A of the Apex Fitness logo. "I ran before they could finish," he sobbed, looking at the wound with pure terror. "I just bolted out the back door and ran. I didn't know where else to go." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his eyes wild with fear. "I thought it was just about getting fit," he said, his voice cracking into a desperate plea. "But it's not. It's about ownership. She told me I could never leave, that I belong to Apex now." The sight of the brand on his arm, angry and raw, snapped me out of my shock. This wasn't about our broken marriage anymore. This was about a man, the man I had loved for 20 years, who had stumbled into a predator's den. My anger hadn't vanished, but it was overshadowed by a primal protective instinct I thought had died the night he left. "Okay," I said, my voice firm and clear, cutting through his panicked sobs. "Okay, Mark, we need to think." I went to the kitchen and came back with a clean towel and the first aid kit. As I gently cleaned the horrific burn, his story tumbled out in a fractured, terrified torrent. Chloe wasn't just a fitness instructor. She was the charismatic leader, the Apex Alpha. She, along with a core group of alphas, preyed on vulnerable individuals, draining their finances and isolating them from their families under the guise of self-improvement. They controlled their lives completely. The gym was just the storefront for a much more sinister operation. The level up ceremony was the final initiation, the point of no return. "They have my car keys, my wallet, my phone," he said, his voice hollow. "Everything is in the apartment. My passport, my birth certificate. She had me bring them over for safekeeping." "They can be replaced," I said, taping a sterile gauze pad over the burn. "You can't." For the first time that night, he looked at me, truly looked at me, and I saw a flicker of the man I used to know in his terrified eyes, a deep, bottomless well of regret. "Sarah, I am so sorry," he whispered. "I threw everything away for a lie. I was so stupid." "Yes, you were," I replied, not unkindly. "But we can deal with that later. Right now, we have to deal with this." I knew we couldn't just hide. These people weren't going to let a branded member just walk away. They knew where I lived. They knew everything about Mark, which meant they knew everything about me. We weren't safe here. I spent the next hour on the phone, first calling an old college friend who was now a detective with the city police. I relayed the story, the branding, the financial control, the isolation. He took it seriously, far more seriously than I'd feared. He told me they'd been building a file on Apex Fitness for months after several families reported similar stories, but they had no one willing to testify. Mark was their first real break. He told us to pack a bag, get out of the house, and meet him at a discreet location. While Mark threw a few essentials into a bag, I made another call to a lawyer, a shark, the best divorce attorney in the state. I explained the situation, the coercion, the linked bank accounts. She was practically salivating. "Financial abuse under duress," she purred. "We'll get every penny back and then some." We were out of the house in under 30 minutes. I drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Mark sat silently in the passenger seat, a ghost haunting the space where he once belonged. The detective met us at an all-night diner 2 towns over. He took Mark's statement, photographed the burn, and assured us they were moving on Apex Fitness immediately. They arranged for Mark to stay in a protected witness facility until things were settled. As the sun began to rise, I dropped him off at the nondescript building. Before he got out of the car, he turned to me, his face etched with shame and a fragile, newfound humility. "Why are you doing this, Sarah? After what I did to you?" I looked at him, at the wreckage of the man who had torn my world apart. "Because 20 years doesn't just disappear, Mark, and because nobody deserves what happened to you. You made a terrible, life-altering mistake, but that doesn't mean you deserve to be owned by someone." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes again. "I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you." "No," I said, and the word was final, a clean, sharp break. "You won't. You're going to spend the rest of your life making it up to yourself. You need to figure out who you are without a coach or a wife telling you, and I need to do the same." That was the last time I saw him in person. The police raided Apex Fitness that morning. Chloe and her alphas were arrested. The story exploded in the local news, a bizarre tale of fitness and fanaticism. My lawyer was a magician. She managed to untangle our finances, seizing back not only Mark's money but also securing a hefty settlement from the now-defunct cult's assets for damages. I sold the house. It had too many ghosts. I bought a small condo in the city, filled it with new furniture that held no memories, and painted the walls a bright, optimistic yellow. Mark, true to his word, signed the divorce papers without a fight and made sure I was the sole beneficiary of the settlement. I heard through his sister that he'd moved to another state to be closer to his family, that he was in therapy, trying to piece his life back together. I hope he does. Sometimes, when I'm drinking my morning coffee from a new, perfectly unchipped mug, I think about that night. I didn't save my marriage. It was already dead. But I did save a man's life. And in doing so, I finally got to save my own. I closed the door on the we I had mourned and opened a new one on a future that was, for the first time in a long time, uniquely, imperfectly, and completely mine.